greatest of all time. It's such an important conversation to have once. It's an important thing to have one time, get it established by the right credible person, and move on. And then you can do beautiful things with it. I've seen this down. I've been to a number of boxing gyms, but they'll cut it out. They'll put pound for pound, and they'll put him here in what year, and they'll put him here in the world champion overall, and they'll put him here. And it kind of goes around the gym, and it doesn't get a lot of attention, but there is a place to look. And if that is a debate that you ever find yourself in, like, at least there's somewhere that you can go to get the answer. So a big one that's come out, and this isn't new. This has been out, but it's something that you can't have while Adesanya's champion. Like, right, all artists get better after death. Can we agree? Even if it's the death of a career or the death of an era, those things have to happen. So when Adesanya still had the championship, it was very hard to compare him and Anderson Silva. Now, not for me. Wasn't for me. They fought head to head. I watched it. I was annoyed when people would push back and tell me that wasn't Anderson in his prime. First off, Anderson looked really, really good that night. And secondly, in his prime, when Anderson started to get out of his prime, he started to get taken down. There was things that you could see that old Anderson wouldn't do. And this fight was completely standing up. Not only was it completely standing up, it was tit for tat. Anderson had even won a round, according to the judges, right? It was 2 rounds to 1 round. It was a very close and competitive fight. One thing about Anderson, and I try not to bring it up anymore. I used to bring it up when I was trying to fight, but I try not to bring it up anymore. But he had won 12 fights in a row. But of those 12 guys, I was the only guy that was still under contract with the company. I think there's a relevance in that, right? You want to compare eras. You don't need to compare you won 12 in a row and then look at Izzy and say that you won 7 fights. Well, if you won 7 fights over much better competition, we won't even have to get into how good these competitions that Anderson Silva took on. We'll just let you know that of the 12, only one of them was still under contract, which was me. Of the guys that Izzy beat, every single title fight that Izzy has ever had, and I do mean all of them, are still all under contract, are still ranked in the top 10, and are still doing interviews in media and have a good part of the population behind them, pushing them back into another title fight. That is a completely different era. It's a completely different era. Now, if somebody has the right to come out and share an opinion on this, it would be Michael Bisping. Michael Bisping called one of Izzy's very first fights. It might have been his first on Dana White Contender Series. But it was one of his very first ones. The one against Marvin Vettori, just by example. And Bisping thought he saw the blueprint for how to beat him. Gave himself some confidence because people are always going to ask, how would you do against this guy? I'm just sharing for you. And Michael Bisping studied Anderson the better part of his career. Michael Bisping fought Anderson, which was such a mega fight, they used it to kick off a network. The network was called UFC Fight Pass. So 2 very massive experiences. And Michael Bisping came to the conclusion that there were 2 different eras, but that there was not yet a comparison, that it is still Anderson Silva. That's a really sweet thing to say. I'm just trying to figure out how do we get to that conclusion? The sport was still forming very much so. I remember when people will say Ronda Rousey was the greatest women's fighter ever. Well, she, along with 5 other girls, said, I will fight in that division. So as it started to get worked out, what we found out is the ones we had as our top contenders were nowhere near our top contenders. And then eventually got revealed to us, she that we had as champion was nowhere near the best. It was just the girls that we had at this time. And I don't want to put down Anderson by any means, but I do want to recognize what I'm seeing within Adesanya. I do want to juxtapose that with the opinion of Michael Bisping. And overarchingly, I guess I'm going to answer the question for you. On everything that you have just seen about the middleweight division and all the discussion, all the talk, and as much as is now at the 4th tier, the greatest middleweight of all time, clearly, is me.